Hi there, my name is Dennis Williams. I'm a preschool teacher at the Ohio School for the Deaf. I'm in the Early Learning Center ELC department. We have children from birth to 5 divided into two groups, birth to 3 and 4 to 5, and I work in the older group. This has been my first year. It's been a very interesting experience with distance learning. So I'd like to give you a little bit of pretext and then talk to you about how we've adapted. Our governor, Mike DeWine, announced that schools would close on March 13th. We found out 2 days prior to that that students would not be coming back to school at that time. So we had a very short amount of time to pack up our rooms and bring everything home. At first, we were working under the assumption that we would come back in April, but that, of course, got extended through May and then to the end of the school year. So that's been a big journey for us to adapt in these couple of months through uncharted territory. It's been a lot of unknowns that we've had to manage. It's like going into a new job altogether, where you're used to having face-to-face conversations with each student, and now you're in a situation where you're trying to teach through a screen in a distance learning context, and that looks very different. This, of course, does not come with any manual. There's no guidebook that tells us what it is that we need to do to be successful in our jobs, and so this has been a big journey for all of us. I call this a wild ride. There's been a lot going on, and it's happened in the blink of an eye. March was survival mode for many of us, getting used to this new normal, finding our bearings. April and May have been a little better, so I'd like to go over a few things that we've done and that our ELC department has gone through since the shutdown happened. We've received new Apple products and devices. We've transitioned, of course, from face-to-face instruction to basically a homeschooling environment where we're teaching through screens. Language development, I'll touch on IEP minutes and Indirect Services. I'll talk a little bit about Google Classroom and slides. I'll talk about some unforeseen barriers, and finally, I'll discuss some things to consider for the fall. We received some new Apple products, some new devices right before the shutdown happened. So that includes MacBooks and iPads. That was really a big leap forward for us. Before that, we barely had anything technological in the classroom. And now every student has an iPad, which has been really nice. We've sent those home with the students and even prior to the shutdown. And as teachers, we have gotten used to this new way of providing instruction from face-to-face to using technology. So that's been a big transition for us. This is, of course, our opportunity to develop our own skills, to figure out which apps and platforms are going to be the most successful for teaching. And that's really been our experience. Apple does provide a teacher certification program to help you develop your skills as educators using distance learning technology. So that is a way to find out which platforms might work best for your needs and for your students' needs and their families. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I do want to emphasize that technology has really made our journey a lot easier. Obviously, all teachers had to go through a big transition to teleworking, working from our own homes and staying there. Like I said, it's like having a completely new job. It doesn't come with a manual or a guidebook or a list of things to do to be successful. So we kind of have to make it up as we go along. Our teachers have sent home packets on a monthly basis So we have what we call Mother Goose Time curriculums. It's an early learning curriculum that we have on a monthly basis. It's nice. It's very visual. It's easily accessible for different language levels, high and low. And it has a lot of hands-on activities. So we've been using that on a monthly basis. We've been creating these packets for the month. So there's like 2 activities per day, plenty of activities for families to do at home. And that's been a big transition for us to go from 4, 5, or 6 activities in person, right, that were pretty easy to take up the day, to now where we are trying to figure out how to continue that type of energy. And that's been a difficult experience. We used to use dramatic play to teach language. Now we're trying to do that virtually, right? And that's a big challenge for us. I have to admit, moving to distance teaching was difficult. I really enjoy hands-on learning with students, and sitting behind a screen has been a big transition for me in particular. As it pertains to language development, obviously we all know that preschool students, when they're coming in before the age of 5, it's really important for them to be looking at language development. It's an important time in their lives, both receptively and productively. And so for our ELC group, we are trying to make sure that we continue age-appropriate language development to keep them on track, to see that they're growing. So we've focused on their early literacy skills, especially in the absence of potentially appropriate language exposure. So we've been focusing on that quite a lot in our distance learning. Before the shutdown, that was obviously a big goal of ours. After the shutdown, as we've moved to distance learning, the goals haven't changed. We know that language is important and that continuing language development is important. And so we've had to really change our approach to that to make sure that these students can continue the growth of their language at home. And so, we have to realize that the environment that they had, that language-rich environment that they had in school, is not necessarily something they have at home. So play-based learning, for example, is something that we used quite a lot in the classroom and that we're now including in the packet that I mentioned earlier, because play-based learning really helps motivate students to get into learning activities, and we feel that what they do learn tends to stick a little better than through other learning activities. It also helps bring about discussion through asking WH questions, and students get that because they're playing, they are having fun, but they're also learning language at the same time. For our dramatic language learning skills, we do like a coffee shop or an ice rink. We have different situations that we come up with. There's a whole number of them. A flower shop, post office, these types of situations. The Weather Channel, where it's a great opportunity for language development to happen in the face-to-face setting, and we've tried to figure out how to replace that in a distance learning setting. But of course, we do feel like it's important that we maintain the support of students in their language development because early literacy is known to be so important. The American School for the Deaf is proud to sponsor the National Deaf Education Conference, which has created the NDEC Signs and NDEC Engage series this year. During the pandemic, we need to be creative and thoughtful about how we reach our communities, and NDEC has done that for our instructors, administrators, and parents. Thank you. Let's talk about IEP minutes and indirect services. That has been a big challenge for us as teachers. We've had to figure out how it is that we're going to meet the minutes and the requirements. We can't just brush them aside, obviously, in the name of the pandemic. We need to keep up with them. And we need to show what we've been doing to try to meet those goals. So we've had some one-on-one Zoom sessions with parents to try to figure out, what we can do. We sent home boom cards. We've created slides that have language prompts to try to engage children in conversation. So we may show them, I would love that Zoom can share screens so that we can show them something, and we do that. So we show them a prompt and then we ask them questions about it. Again, using these WH questions so that we can engage students in conversation. That really helps, again, with both the receptive and productive language skills. And it's great to have those minutes continuing as well as language development. We do some activities through Zoom. Obviously, the fact that it's very visual is helpful. We use something called directed drawing, where we may bring up a YouTube video that shows how you can create something in a step-by-step manner. So you might have, a bird of the month, and they'll show you how to draw a particular bird this time. Or they'll show you a summer camp setting where you see an island and a boat and ask you to draw that, which is obviously a pleasurable experience. It's a fun activity. But once that activity is done, you can then direct the child's attention to certain elements like the boat and ask probing questions that develop that child's language. You can use classifiers to show how the wind picked the boat up and moved the sail along. And it's an opportunity to engage more with students. That's fun and enjoyable. So we have that directed drawing activity. We do some STEAM activities with Play-Doh. That's one way we can work together through Zoom. We just ask them to create like 3 balls through Play-Doh or other art activities. We do matching cards. We have something called the grasshopper card matching number game, where we have a bunch of cards and they're flipped over, and then we pick one up and we ask how many grasshoppers are on this card, and there's some number, 1 or 5 or something like that. And then we ask the student to find their card that matches the same number. And if they pick a card that doesn't have the same number of grasshoppers, then we can compare those numbers and say 1 is smaller than 3 or whatnot. And so these are ways that we can still interact even though we're looking at each other through a screen. We also do some virtual field trips through Zoom. So we might go to a zoo and talk about animals and ask what the animal is doing, where it's hiding, and if it's sleeping because it's tired, or if it's eating or running around. So again, these are good language development activities. We have one where there's a candy factory and you can see candy coming off the conveyor belt. And these are ways that we can prompt the students to use ASL. And ASL is such a great language because it is so easily conveyed through virtual means across these different types of situations. And once again, this is one of our big goals that we're trying to maintain during COVID, which is language development. Indirect services for parents is difficult. Some students have other disabilities and we can't monitor those on a regular basis. And we don't know how the detriment of virtual learning is really coming to them because we can't interact with them as much as we did before, where some of these students really learn best in a personal environment. So we're trying to provide some indirect services to parents to coach them along so that they can meet the IEP goals. We sit down with parents, we talk to them about how they feel. We always want to have an open conversation to discuss ways that I as a teacher can support the parent, that we can support identity development in the children to make sure that they're learning at standards at home. Some students may benefit from taking a lot of time in the morning to work on learning. Others may prefer the afternoon. some we've had one activity where we have a bunch of different cars, and we ask them to sort them by category or by number or color or different ways. Or we'll have, a card with one dot, and we'll ask them to put one car in front of it, and then a card with two dots, and we'll ask them to put two cars in front of it, and so on. And this really helps the child understand the parallels between tactile learning and distance learning, so that they can continue the benefits during this time, and they're still getting the support that they need even though they're at home. We've also created some visual printouts that can be used with clothespins, like a schedule. So the child can say, okay, well, I woke up, and so they'll move the clothespin down. Okay, it's breakfast time, they'll move it down again, and they'll go through the day with nap time and lunch and playtime. So that helps them see the day move along and prompt them as to what they should expect. Now, collaboration with related services is going to be really important. This can include SLPs, OTs, and PTs. So on a team with them, I want to make sure that those services are still being provided. Some deaf students with additional disabilities may need PT on a regular basis, or others may want SLP therapy. So there are different considerations and different services that we need to make sure are coordinated, and we can combine them into one activities. I'm telling you, it's possible. We just need to communicate with these service providers, think outside the box, come up with creative ways to engage all of us in one activity with the student. Here's one example. There was one student who had, who needed PT, and there was a big step thing that they were supposed to do with their legs in order to get their PT in. The OT took some small stickers and would stick it on a piece of paper and ask the student to do this according to the letter of the week. And then the SLP would ask about the colors of the stickers and where they were. And so we were all using this one activity together to provide coordinated services. So it is possible. You just have to really think through it in order to make sure that can happen. Google Classroom and Google Slides have been successful for us. It's very accessible. It's very easy to put a bunch of videos and resources in one place for students to access. And those can be visual materials in ASL or auditory materials for those who would like to access English. Or you might combine them and have somebody signing and get a voiceover. So we've had some really positive feedback that everything is in one place. Google Slides, we've put Bitmoji in a virtual classroom environment, and I'll show you what that looks like. That's been really motivating for some of the younger students to access. So you can see how this is really accessible. You can go full screen and click on different stories, and it's easy for the whole family to take advantage of this anytime, anywhere, on any device. Of course, while there are a lot of positive things about this new way of teaching, there are some drawbacks as well. Obviously, deaf students with other disabilities are missing out, and they may benefit from being in a classroom environment. Plus, social and emotional learning is not happening. We need to consider what's going to happen when our students come back to a classroom environment, and they may have some problems with emotional regulation because they haven't been practicing that. They haven't been practicing how to be a friend. There are not enough deaf-friendly apps, for sure. There's not enough resources for our classrooms. Story time seems to be okay, but we want to make sure that there are enough resources for young students in particular to learn through ASL. And, we can't really measure our goals very well through a screen, or at least it's more difficult. So we do have some things that we need to consider. The IEP goals for the fall might need to be changed. With distance learning, they might not be relevant anymore. Learning through screen, how many reminders, how many prompts we get, how many words the student is expected to know may need to change. Again, social and emotional learning might look different, and we might need to reconsider how it is that we're going to teach that through a screen. When we come back to school in person, how is that transition going to be made easy for these students? It could be 6 months, it could be much longer, where these students are not in a classroom environment, and we want to make sure that they transition easily. Finally, let's consider home visits or hybrid learning, where we have an in-person component and a distance learning component that are offered in tandem for some students. That's all for now on my mind. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learning what we're doing. I look forward to growing in this experience in the future, especially in early intervention and early language development. I'm hoping to see some continued improvement as we do this. Thanks so much.